Good afternoon again. Now we're going to move on to session 7, which is the final session of my first week here at Petra University. So the strategic management process, go back to slide number 2 in this presentation and you will find mergers and acquisitions strategies. These are the bottom left segment of the strategy formulation. So we'll continue with this. It's building on what we have been doing up to now in the other previous 6 sessions. If we look at slide 4, reasons for acquisitions and the problems in achieving success, we can see a range of reasons for acquisitions and a range of kinds of problems that can arise. So increased market power, overcoming entry barriers, the cost of new product development, etc. Lower risk compared to developing new products, increased diversification, etc. All of these are some of the reasons for acquisition. But the kind of problems that can arise are integration difficulties, inadequate evaluation of the target. In other words, not enough due diligence on the company that you're trying to acquire. Larger extraordinary debt that the other company might have that you may not be aware of. Inability to achieve synergies, or you're broadening your diversification to the point that you're not able to maintain control of it. So these are some of the difficulties that can arise. Now, mergers and acquisitions, there have been many waves of these over the last century. And there is a current wave going on, which has been going on until the end of last year. And that was a big increase in the number of mergers and acquisitions in Asia, in Europe, in North America, and generally around the world. But with the coronavirus situation now, acquisitions are on a back burner for many companies. They're no longer thinking in terms of acquiring new companies because they're trying to consolidate what they have rather than lose the advantages that they have gained through earlier acquisitions. In the 1980s, there were 55,000 acquisitions valued at $1.3 trillion US. In the 1990s, that exceeded 11 trillion in value. So a huge jump from the 80s to the 90s, an 11-fold jump. Now mergers and acquisitions peaked in 2000, and they've been going up to a fairly steady extent up to the end of last year. With the coronavirus, it's difficult to estimate, but you can expect very clearly that there's going to be a downsize in the range and variety of acquisitions that are going to take place in the next number of months or in the short term. Now mergers, acquisitions and takeovers, well, how do they differ? What separates them? Well, a merger is a transaction where two firms agree to integrate their operations on a relatively co-equal basis because the resources and capabilities are fairly similar. So two firms come together and they integrate their resources for operations purposes. An acquisition is a transaction where one firm buys a controlling or 100% interest in the other firm. So it's a takeover type situation, or at least an acquisition is where you're buying out another company. Now, while most mergers represent friendly agreements, there are takeovers as well. And a takeover may be a hostile or maybe a friendly takeover. A takeover is an acquisition and normally not a merger, where the target firm did not solicit the bid of the acquiring firm and often resist the acquisition, so you have a hostile type takeover situation. So these are different definitions, and the reasons for acquisitions are to increase market power. How can I increase my market power, my market share? One of the ways of doing that is, in fact, by acquiring other companies or taking over other companies. So they enable firms to gain greater market power. Acquisitions to meet a market power objective generally involve buying a supplier, a competitor, a distributor, or a business in a highly related industry. Horizontal acquisitions, where a competitor in the same industry is acquired. A firm that has engaged in horizontal acquisition is a firm's market power is exploiting cost-based and revenue-based synergies. So if you have a competitor out there who's doing the same kind of business as you are, but they're more effective and efficient in doing so, then by acquiring them, you are increasing increasing your market power, and also in turn you're increasing your range, and it's because of its similarity to your own business, it's called a horizontal acquisition as opposed to a vertical acquisition. Vertical acquisition has occurred when a firm acquires a supplier or distributor which is positioned either backwards or forward in the firm's cost activity value chain. So if you have a supplier of raw materials, for example, go into your company and you buy that supplier, then that's a vertical acquisition. Or if you have a distributor for your products or services and you buy them out, then that's also a vertical acquisition. So a vertical acquisition could be going backwards or forwards in relation to your value chain, in relation to the kind of industry that you're in. So you've got different kinds of acquisitions, both of which are effective. Now, we've talked about barriers to entry. When we look at first movers and second movers. But as we look at barriers to entry, we can look at investments in large-scale manufacturing facilities that enable the firm to achieve economies of scale so that we can offer competitive prices. So if you take over a company that's much larger than your own, or you take over a company which is distributing products in a wider marketplace than you're currently working in, that investment could have large-scale implications for your company and also increase its profitability. Significant expenditures in advertising and promotion to overcome brand loyalty towards existing products may take place. You have to establish or break into existing distribution channels so that your goods are convenient to customers and our customers are aware of them. So these are different tactics that you can use in overcoming entry barriers. Now, cross-border acquisitions is where a company in one country is buying out or acquiring a company in another country. So you have a lot of cross-border activity taking place within the European Union, for example. You have cross-border taking place between Canada, the US, and Mexico. These are three countries within the North American arena. And so again, you've got lots of cross-border activity across those boundaries. It may be the fastest way to enter new markets. So by acquiring a company across the border from your own, for example, an Indonesian company buying into a Thai company, or a Cambodian company, or a Vietnamese company, that can be very fruitful. An example of this is where, for example, in Myanmar, Viatel, which is a mobile service provider from Vietnam, has bought into providing a viable service for Burmese mobile service companies. So they're now providing an alternative. So Viatel has now virtually ousted Ooredoo, which is a company from Qatar. So when the mobile industry in Myanmar expanded a few years ago, it had gone from a situation where there's only one mobile service provider, and that was the Myanmar Post and Telegraph situation. But at that time, a SIM card cost $2,500. So virtually nobody had a mobile phone in Myanmar. Today, everyone has a mobile phone in Myanmar. And many of my students there have 2 mobile phones. And the reason for that is because they opened up the market to greater competition. Telenor, which is a Norwegian company, came in. Ooredoo from the Middle East, from Qatar, also came in, and they effectively competed against Myanmar Post and Telegraphs. The result of which was the price of a SIM card went down from $2,500 to $1.50. And as soon as that happened, of course, everyone then could afford $1.50 for a SIM card, so they could afford to buy a mobile phone. But if a SIM card was costing $1,000, then nobody was buying the phones because it was too expensive. So here you have cross-border acquisition where Vietnam has now taken an active position in relation to Myanmar Post and Telegraphs. And also Vietnam has taken a strong position in the country of Laos. In Laos, for example, most of the foreign investment in Laos today is in fact coming from Vietnam, although many people think it's coming from China. No, it's Vietnam. And they have been expanding their marketplace very effectively. Now the question is, Can Indonesia break into some of these marketplaces? Can they expand beyond the boundaries of Indonesia into these other related countries that are all part of ASEAN anyway? So it can be a very fast way into opening new markets. It can provide more control over foreign operations than do strategic alliances with foreign partners. So because you're in a company that has acquired another company cross-border, you have more control of that company than if you're competing with it in some way. Acquisitions are also a way to gain popularity and related to horizontal diversification strategy. So where you have products or services that are similar to what other people are providing, and you get into and acquiring some of those other businesses, you are also going to increase your market share because you'll take over their market share. That can be a very useful tactic or strategy for long-term investment, but also it can be a great way of increasing your market share and increasing your diversification. Now, some of the problems in achieving acquisition success are that 20% of all mergers and acquisitions are successful, but approximately 60% produce disappointing results, and at least 20% are total failures. So while an acquisition may look very attractive on paper, it very often doesn't work out quite as we expected. And part of the difficulty is integrating into two firms after the acquisition is complete. There's a culture in every company, and those cultures may clash with each other if you acquire another company where its culture is not compatible with your own. Then there's going to be a lot of competition between you. And in fact, a rivalry can exist to such an extent that you actually do each other harm. The other one is paying too much for the target company because you haven't done an effective due diligence and evaluation of what the company is worth. And sometimes managers are very determined to get an acquisition through because they get a lot of bonuses and so on from doing so. But it may not be in the best interest of their company that this acquisition goes ahead. But it may be in the best interest of the managers themselves because they get personal benefit from this. And sometimes this happens where managers go out acquiring lots of new companies and then leave. And they take all the benefits with them. And the company that they left is left with the problem of trying to integrate the companies into some compatible arrangement. Management may be preoccupied or overly focused on acquisitions, and they may combine firms becoming too large. So if your firm becomes too big and it's unmanageable and not easily controlled, then you have a major problem on your hands. So you may look better, but you're in serious trouble. Integration difficulties are major ones, and the classic one that I came across many years ago was the British European Airways Corporation and the British Overseas Airways Corporation, which were merged together to form BA. So while these are both British companies, one was focusing on the European market, one was focusing on the global market. But those in the global market, the BOAC staff, always felt they were superior to the BEA staff because they dealt with cross-continental travel, whereas the BEA managers and staff dealt with European Airways only, and so dealt with just European transportation between European countries. So they all had short-haul business, whereas the BOAC had long-haul business between the UK, America, UK, Africa, UK, Middle East, and Australia, New Zealand, and so on. So building effective working relationships may be very different. Another example is where US auto company and a German auto company come together. The German auto company, like Mercedes, customers of Mercedes tend to buy a car and they keep it for 5 to 10 years. A US company that's in the same auto industry may in fact, customers have a different attitude. They buy a car and change that car within about 18 months to 2 years, 3 years. So the turnaround for purchasing new cars in the US is very short. Turnaround for purchasing new cars in the German area are very large. And yet the Germans are paid significantly less than their US counterparts. So when you bring these two companies together, the Germans are saying, well, our cars are much better than yours, but why are we being paid significantly less than you? And of course, the American managers don't want to concede that there's such a huge difference in the quality of cars, but they also don't want to concede that they're being paid significantly higher than the Germans. So a US manager of an auto company may be earning a few $1 million a year. A German auto manager may be making 100,000, 200,000 euros per year. Huge difference in income. And yet the Germans see themselves as the superior company. So where you've got incompatibilities in the integration of these two kind of cultures, you've got major problems. So integration difficulties becomes a major factor in the success or otherwise of a merger. 7 reasons that firms implement acquisition strategies. This is slide 21. Could be to increase market power, overcome entry barriers, reduce the cost of new product development and increase speed to market, lower risk compared to developing new products, and increase diversification, avoiding excessive competition, and learn and develop new capabilities. So these are all good reasons why we go for acquisitions and so on, and mergers. But reasons for poor performance in acquisitions are integration difficulties, as I've just given examples of, inadequate evaluation of the target, not carrying out enough due diligence, there may be large or extraordinary debt on the company that you acquired, and you're not fully aware of all of that at the time of signing. Inability to achieve synergy between the cultures of the two companies, too much diversification, you may be stretching your managerial resources too thinly and not able to keep control of the overall business. And lastly, managers overly focus on acquisitions over the actual value of the acquisition to their parent company. So these are the reasons why this may not work. So due diligence is a major factor. Not looking at the due diligence of the company you want to acquire. Do you know what its debt structure is? Do you know how its finances are set up? Do you know its market share? Do you know whether it's gaining or losing market share at the time that you're interested in taking over that company? All of these are questions that good managers need to be paying attention to. However, many managers are incentivized to acquire new companies as fast as possible because it's a big bonus for them when they do so. So that incentive may not be in the best interest of the company, but it may be in the best interest of the managers who are making the decisions on behalf of that company. So these are questions that you need to have a look at. The ability to achieve synergy between companies is a major factor, and I just alluded to that earlier on. And that's another question as to whether going down this road of acquisitions, mergers, and so on is in fact a good idea in the first place. So while there are success stories to be achieved, there are also lots of failures, and there's lots of cases where there's question marks over the extent to which it was a viable decision to make in the first place. Thank you very much.